The Manilow Method podcast is a production by Logan Allen and me, Barry Harris. Now, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, here we are once again. If you watched our episode a little bit ago, that was part one of the Manilow RCA discussion here on the Manilow Method. Here's part two. Once again, Logan Allen, Barry Harris coming at you through your screens and through your ears. Here we go. This is side two of the Manilow RCA record from 1985. Track 6 on this album is called At the Dance. This was written by Barry Manilow, Adrian Anderson, and Charles Fearing. This is an interesting song. This was a live staple from the era. He would do this a lot towards the beginning of the shows. And what I think is one of the most interesting things from this happens around the 2-minute mark. From 2 minutes to like 2 minutes 30 is the most interesting section of the song for me, because we get a timbale solo from our percussionist at the timestamp is 2 minutes and 23 seconds. And then at 2 minutes and 6 seconds, we get a Barry Manilow scat solo. He's a dooba-doo-bap-ba-doo-ba. Like, this is so rare in the Manilow catalog to get him actually doing, I would say, maybe a little bit of jazz vocal, just improvisation stuff. I think it's very interesting. And one thing I want to mention is this the largest key center shift in the Manilow catalog? Because D major is where we start, and then we end in A flat major. That is so far apart. Like, I'm not sure there's any place in the catalog, maybe you can correct me or somebody watching can correct me, that is, and it's not even, he doesn't even work up to that point. He just goes there. And somehow it doesn't feel forced. Barry, what are your thoughts on how this track is composed?
Yeah, well, first off, to talk about modulation shift, so we are in D major, we start at the dance in D major, and then we end it in A flat. So that's a tritone up. The biggest leap in terms of the key change was ships, so that was in B major. We're just ships that pass in the night, and then it goes up to F, which is actually, believe it or not, it's a tie.
Yeah.
So F major, so between B and F major, that's a tritone. So At the Dance ties ships for the biggest jump for a repeated chorus modulation. So that is that. But to talk about At the Dance, it is a unique track because of the way it was written. So just to remind everybody who didn't see part one, I'm sure everybody watching this watched part one, but in case you did not,
go back and watch it if you haven't, please.
You should. Yeah. But just a quick recap that we have a magazine interview that Manilow gave at the time of the release of this record to Tracks Magazine, and he gives a track-by-track commentary. So throughout this discussion, we are referring directly to Manilow's quotes so we can allow the artist's perspective to help guide our discussion. So I'd like to read what he said about this.
Yes.
He says, again, like with Some Sweet Day, I've been singing this song live in concert for about a year and a half because the three of us, Adrian Anderson and I, and a man named Charles Fearing, a wonderful studio guitar player, we wrote this around the time we did Some Sweet Day. Again, I stuck that one in the show right then and there, and I've also been getting a lot of requests for this one. I had a little fun with it because I did a little jazzy bebop middle and a little interlude that was fun. And I agree, that interlude is so much fun. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the record. So to talk about that scat solo, when I hear that scat solo, I will tell you who I thought of immediately. I thought of Al Jarreau. So Al Jarreau, an amazing, legendary artist, began his career in the 1970s, really became a household name by the 1980s. And one of the things that Al Jarreau was famous for is that he was a cross-genre artist. He would sing jazz songs. He would sing pop songs. He would sing R&B songs. In fact, he has won a Grammy in jazz, pop, and R&B. One of the few artists who was able to do that. And Al Jarreau, on one of his songs, Boogie Down, it's a very up-tempo song, and it features a scatting solo. I wonder if that was in the foreground of everybody's thinking in making this record, that there's somebody out there who's introducing a jazz sensibility into a pop record. So I think that would make sense if that perhaps inspired this. A couple of other interesting things to note. This is an amazing Will Lee bass line. Like, have you checked out and thought about all that Will Lee is doing on this record?
Well, let me say, I'm going to read you word for word what one of my notes was. I was loving the bass line, then realized it was Will Lee.
Yeah, right?
So when I heard the bass, I checked my... You remember this from part one, those who have seen it, my laundry list of people. I checked who played bass on this one, and I saw it was Will Lee, and I just pressed play and moved on, because I'm like, of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah, and so a couple other thoughts about at the Dance is that when he premiered it live, it was slightly different. He started in the key of D major, just like the record. They go into the dance part of it, and instead of scatting, he actually danced with Vanessa, his percussion player, and then he used it as an opportunity to do the moonwalk, Michael Jackson's trademark dance move, at which point he quipped, "Eat your heart out, Michael Jackson!" And when they modulated it at the end, instead of going up to A flat major, he actually just went up a half step to E flat. Come along with me, let's get together at the dance. So he kept it under control. He didn't make that big modulation for the live version. So when he would play this live, this had a little bit of a different feel, a little bit of a different energy, but nevertheless, like he said, it always got a great response. And we will definitely go out on a limb here and say this is a song that never left this era. We have no record and no inkling that this may have been either performed or even quoted or alluded to in any other performance or any other era.
Yeah, I have nothing. I have nothing to suggest that, like you said, it wasn't even quoted after this era. And speaking of songs that absolutely did not leave this era, we're going to move on here to track 7. And this is If You Were Here With Me Tonight, written by Barry Manilow, Lisa Sinette Thomas, and Eric Borenstein. This song, up until very, very recently, both Barry and I did not believe was ever played live. We thought that this was a song that was just on the album, and it wasn't a single. They never played it. It just got buried. But we were proven wrong. Manilow TV, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's the subscription service where you can pay, I believe it's $10 a month, to watch 19 different Barry Manilow concerts from throughout his career, and every month they cycle 18 shows that they've already shown, and then they add one new show every month. And one of the shows that was recently aired for the first time in 2025 was I have it right here. It was January 11th, 1986. It wasn't the full show, but it was still enough for us to learn that he played If You Were Here With Me Tonight, not only at this show, but he also mentioned that he played it the night before. So now we have official confirmation from Barry Manilow himself that he played this song 2 times ever. And then that was the last night of the 86 tour. He went away, came back with Swing Street and the Big Fun era and all that stuff, and I don't think that song would have been featured anywhere. So it's possible that this song, If You Were Here With Me Tonight, was only played live twice. There's a classic piano intro on this song, and even though it's the 80s pop sound, this is kind of proving that the classic Manilow that lives in everybody's, late 70s hearts still lives on, even if it does sound a little different. And I wanted to mention, there is a huge distorted guitar entrance at 1 minute 11 seconds in, right as we get ready to lead in to the chorus. It kind of caught me off guard, and this was, I think, the best way I can describe it is, this is his way of adding 80s flair to the roots that he built in the 70s. He's taking the classic power ballad idea and adding these 80s concepts like, the distorted guitar that all of the hair metal bands and whatever things that they were doing on their power ballads. And he was integrating those little sprinkles of ideas into the stuff that he was most known for, which I think is a genius way of incorporating new ideas into songs that otherwise might be considered, run-of-the-mill Barry Manilow tracks. And I listened to this, and we talked about this on part 1. Once again, shameless plug. Go back and watch part 1. This album is such a turn after Paradise Cafe, because you have the Here Comes the Night album, which is, a little more rock and roll than he was. And then you go Paradise Cafe, it's on my wall, 100% jazz, absolutely jazz. And then you have this, which is like, it's like Here Comes the Night continued, but it's its own thing. It's electronic, synthesizers, drum machines. It is like those 3 albums. It's insane that they all 3 came out in this order that they did, because they're all 3 so different. Barry, what is your reaction to this song actually being played live?
Yeah, it was amazing to hear it played live, and I feel like it had a completely different arc when it was played live, because the ending on the studio record dies down nice and quietly and has a very peaceful ending, whereas the live version has a big last note. So it was interesting to hear a different take on this song. But I want to highlight something extremely important about this song. This song stands out in the Manilow catalog for a big reason. It is one of only a handful of songs that Barry Manilow has put his name on as the artist, but did not have a hand in the production at all. And that is extremely rare in the Manilow world. I can give you just a few small examples. One is Read 'Em and Weep, that was produced by Jim Steinman. The only contribution that Barry Manilow had on that record was singing the vocal. Same goes for the original Featherbed session. So Barry Manilow was part of a ghost band called Featherbed. It was produced by Tony Orlando. This is in the early 1970s, before he was known by anybody. He was produced by Tony Orlando, and he spoke about the experience, and he did not like what Tony did to his song, Could It Be Magic. He had written Could It Be Magic based on Chopin's Prelude in C minor, thought of it as a nice power ballad, and it turned into a bubblegum pop song. And so he didn't like that experience, and I think that scared him straight out of working with other producers. Jim Steinman was another exception, and George Duke produced If You Were Here With Me Tonight was the other big exception. But now, I looked at this commentary that Manilow wrote, and he speaks glowingly about George Duke's talents. He said, "This one I let George Duke produce, and I wrote this with a friend of mine, Eric Bornstein, and Lisa Sinnett. George is a black producer who does a lot of R&B stuff and is very well respected. He liked this song and said he'd like to produce me doing it, and I just let him go. It's one of the few I just showed up and sang on. I just let him do what he does best, and I really like this because it has a little bit of that R&B groove to it, and I think it's a very emotional song. RCA tells me that this just might be another single, and that would make me happy." Well, unfortunately, that never came to pass, of course, that being released as a single. What's your reaction to that, Logan?
I mean, listen, we talked about this on part 1. We're talking about it here now, how this album really didn't get the widespread recognition that past albums did. And I mean, who knows? I mean, any of these songs could have been released as a single and maybe done something, but that's easy to say with hindsight, looking back now 40 years and saying, okay, yeah, that would have worked. Maybe it wouldn't have worked. Barry and I were both not alive when this album came out, so that's also very important to mention. I wanted to mention something here that absolutely boggles me. When I'm just kind of doing whatever, hanging around, I'll, open up Spotify or whatever and put on an album that we're about to discuss. And I pulled up this album a little while ago just to listen to it, just to kind of refamiliarize myself with it. this song, If You Were Here With Me Tonight, is the most streamed song from this album on Spotify. Why? I can't answer that. I don't know.
I have a guess.
Of course you do. What's your guess?
So there was a compilation called All Time Hits. It came out in 1992, and it was meant for the international market. And this song, If You Were Here With Me Tonight, was one of the tracks included. So that gives me a sense that perhaps in some international countries, this song might have succeeded and may have been embraced. So that could explain why there's a lot of numbers surrounding this particular song. And one of the interesting things is this is not too far-fetched of a theory, because it happened to Barry Manilow when he went to play the Philippines in 1992. He got to meet some people there, and he asked them, is there any song that you're most looking forward to hearing? And nearly all of them said, As Sure As I'm Standing Here, which is an album track from 1975's album Trying to Get the Feeling. And he didn't really remember the song, so he had to go to his hotel room, make a chord chart, and hand it out to the band, and he played a rendition of it that night to everybody singing along word for word. So I'd like to believe that that might have happened maybe in an Asian territory. This song could have really made an impact, and I bet, if we were to ever do a tour internationally, if we were to play the best of Manilow, I have a feeling we'll find out who wants to hear this song.
And I just pulled up the stats here on Spotify. If You Were Here With Me Tonight has 116,000 streams. I'm Your Man is trailing with 3,000 less at 113,000. So those two are very clearly the leaders for most popular tracks off of this album. Are we ready to move on, Barry?
Yes.
Here we go. Track 8, Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again. Written by the now famous Copacabana team, Barry Manilow, Bruce Sussman, and Jack Feldman. I have to say, being the age that I am, I'm 19 at the time of filming this, I am definitely more used to listening to the version that was later featured on the Scores album that was released in 2004. To me, the sound of it is a little more what I would expect out of this song, because it's a shuffle. It's a sing-along song. To me, this is the Can't Smile Without You of the 80s. I think because, you even have the climbing key changes. You have the same number of key changes that happen in Can't Smile Without You. So I really think that this was maybe not a conscious attempt at redoing Can't Smile Without You, but it certainly has a lot of the same flavors that Can't Smile Without You does. And something important about this track here is we have yet another Bob Gaudio appearance on a Manilow record, which is very interesting because a little bit ago we did the If I Should Love Again album, and he showed up there on a track. So it's like he is all of a sudden rubbing elbows with Barry Manilow all the time in the early and mid 80s. So I think it's very interesting that he was included on this as a co-producer, and I really do think this song is probably one of the most, if not the most, well-remembered songs in the catalog, especially in the UK. What do you think about the impact this song has had, Barry?
Yeah, well, Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again, like you said, it's showed up in many different eras. It has sporadically showed up all throughout the years. Every tour, or almost every tour, it usually comes out at least a few dates. Here's a great story. In 2022, Barry Manilow was doing a hits tour, and he was playing the northeastern seaboard. And I was able to catch a couple of the concerts. And randomly, I was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and he played Sweet Heaven. He didn't do it, apparently. Actually, he did it once on another time in the tour, but only twice during that tour was Sweet Heaven brought out. So we got a lucky strike extra that was really amazing. And one thing that is really prevalent about the United Kingdom fans is they expect him to sing this song, and when he sings it, they sing it back to him, except they change the lyrics when he sings, "I'll shout it everywhere I go, I'll sing it on the radio." All the audience yells back, "We love you, Barry Manilow." It's so beautiful. And he always then makes a quip, "I like your version of it." And sometimes he'll just stop singing and let the audience just take it. And it's a great moment. So I feel like he feels the connection to his fans with this particular song. And interestingly, that actually leads me into Barry Manilow's commentary for this. What he says is, quote, "I've been doing this one in concert, and it stops the show dead, stops the show cold. And there was a lot of pressure to make a record that would be as wonderful and as powerful as the live performance and as entertaining as the movie version of it. It involved Bob Gaudio, who helped me co-produce this one, and I think it works. I'm crazy for it. As a matter of fact, it's the one that everyone remembers from this album. It's the one that they call me about and say they can't stop singing." And then one other thought Manilow adds, is that he thought Bob Gaudio's treatment of it was exactly right because it reminds me a little of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head and a little bit of those adorable shuffles that would have been played in the 1940s. Like we mentioned, this is from the Copacabana movie, which takes place in the 1940s. We will expound upon that at a later date, but the thing I'll just mention about Sweet Heaven, musically, I love the way this unfolds. The orchestration that Artie Butler has for this is just absolutely gorgeous. And Bob Gaudio, and for those who don't know who Bob Gaudio is, he is one of the Four Seasons along with Frankie Valli, and he and Frankie Valli founded the Four Seasons together. In fact, I heard a story that Frankie Valli and Bob Gaudio founded the Four Seasons with a handshake agreement.
Wow.
They never had a contract. They just had a handshake that they would be 50-50 partners, and they apparently are still to this day. So, Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again, I think for a reason, this is a beloved staple. It's really embraced by the fans, and I think if you were to really have a career-spanning distillation of Barry Manilow, you definitely have to put Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again in that mix.
So something interesting about this particular recording on the RCA record is he employs a technique that he uses live a lot, in that when the song finishes, the band goes back into it. One of the really common examples of that nowadays in the live show is Could It Be Magic, where the band will end and then YL on the drums will kick back in, and then the band comes in and they come straight back into it.
Yeah.
That is something he's done with a lot of songs over the years, and it's Sweet Heaven that really, in the live shows, I think, was one of the first songs where that was a consistent thing that they would do, sometimes even doing 2 or 3 reprises after the song. So I think it's really interesting that this original studio recording of the song actually has a reprise. They hit the last note, and then we come straight back into it. I think that is very interesting for a studio record, especially since that's a technique he still uses live on stage to this day. Are we ready, Barry?
Yeah, and I also want to mention one thing that I think is a special memory for many people, like my parents especially. My parents went to see Barry Manilow at the Gershwin Theater during his residency on Broadway in 1989, and they tell me that Barry Manilow actually opened the second act after intermission with Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again, and yes, he did reprise it at the end. Somebody yelled one more time. I wish I could have been there for the Gershwin. I think that's probably the one concert I most wish I could go back in time and see, but in that particular, I should say, Gershwin, why that's relevant to Manilow RCA is that Manilow RCA was very well represented in the Gershwin. He did Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again. He did the last track of Manilow RCA. He did I'm Your Man. So a lot of these were featured very prominently.
Now let's move on to a song that I don't know if it was ever featured in the live show. This is a duet with Muffy Hendrix. Again, if you know Manilow live presently in 2026, you go see him live. Muffy Hendrix is on stage singing backed up vocals. This is duet with Muffy called Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, written by Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson. I just want to say, listening to this, comparing this record's Muffy with the Muffy that we've heard live today, her voice today is still just as strong as it was in the 80s. Like, it is pretty crazy that she has been able to maintain that power over the years, and it's I would never tire of listening to the work that she does. And considering that Muffy was featured in the live act in the mid 80s, it would make sense, you would think, that maybe they would have tried this. The Dionne Warwick tune Run to Me, that was something that Manilow and Muffy would duet on. I just can't help but wonder if there was ever, a handful of nights where maybe they swapped out Run to Me for this song, because, I mean, it could easily work. My only concern with them doing it live would maybe be that some of the parts that Manilow has, especially towards the end, are really high. They're really high. The last note that he holds at 2 minutes 56 seconds is this high G. He holds it in kind of a falsetto for a few seconds, actually. It's not just he has to hit it and then go away. So maybe they would have had to have dropped the key if they did it live. But, I mean, who knows? The hats, at this point, the hats are just permanently on, the conspiracy hats. So, Barry, what do you think of this duet?
Yes, so I've loved this duet since I was a kid. It's a great pairing because they did so well live on stage. Now, one of the things, going to Manilow's commentary from Tracks Magazine, he mentions that it was an executive at RCA who suggested that Muffy should sing the duet with him. Now, here's what's not clear. We don't know if the executive suggested that Muffy should go in and record the duet with him, or did Muffy sing the demo with Barry and suggested that that should be the final record. That could go either way in my mind. One thing to set context in 1985 is that Marvin Gaye had just passed away, and so I think there was a bit of a tribute aspect to it, that they wanted to pay tribute to Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. And Tammy Terrell, by the way, is Marvin Gaye's duet partner, famous for singing Ain't No Mountain High Enough. And really sadly, she died at a very young age. And in fact, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, the whole album, was one of his first recording projects that he released after her passing, and it was suggested that a lot of what he was thinking and feeling had a lot to do with a reaction of her loss. So at this time in 1985, I think it was entirely fitting that they wanted to really perform a loving tribute to the both of them. And I think, looking at it from that context, I think this song makes total sense and was the perfect addition to the record. And of course, Manilow seems to have modernized it and fit it to his style in a great way. So it's a great song. It was a great song with Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell, and it's also great with Muffy and Barry. And the best part of all, when you hear the dynamic of Muffy Hendrix' voice, you were commenting on that at the top. She has the amazing ability to not only sing supporting vocals, but if she steps out, her voice can be incredibly powerful, as you hear on that very last note. It stands out immediately. So I'm so glad that they recorded this. This was a favorite of mine. And they actually made a reference to this at the Midnight with Manilow performance in Denver, Colorado. It was the last night of the One Last Time tour, where Barry Manilow was going to pack it in from all the long touring, and they decided to have a midnight show after the main show had ended, and it was just a fun evening of reminiscing and also doing a few songs that had not been done in many, many years. But he then decided to bring Muffy up so they could have a conversation and reminisce, and they played the track and reflected that they had recorded this song. So I'm glad that to this day, if you see the show, Muffy and Barry sing a duet on Dancing in the Street, they have this nice little segment. Sometimes they'll do this medley of up-tempo songs, and they'll include a cover of Dancing in the Streets by Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, and Muffy will sing lead, and then Barry and Muffy will get up front and they'll sing together. So it's such a great moment. So something you can look forward to if you see Manilow live.
I think an important quality for supporting vocalists is having both the ability to be a supporting vocalist and a lead vocalist, because not only does it come down to being confident in your part, it also comes down to being able to blend with a group and be able to do as many things as possible that may be thrown your way, like stepping out and doing a song midway through the show. I think that's a very important quality that not only Barry Manilow, but so many other big touring artists look for in their supporting vocalists. And he really hit the jackpot when he found Muffy in the late 70s, because Muffy has been with him since the 70s. And as far as musicians go, I think she's the one that goes the furthest back as far as the current lineup goes. So, okay, here we go. We're going to do one more track from the regular release, and then oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about. We have so much to talk about with this album, so buckle up, everybody. Here we go. Catch my breath. Track 10, It's a Long Way Up. Written by Barry Manilow and John and Nessie. This is the final track of the Manilow RCA record. This song was played live a lot on the actual tour supporting the album, and it was taken out of the tour. It was featured later in a later era when he would open the shows in the late 80s with a mashup of this song and Sweet Life from Barry Manilow 1. We haven't talked about Barry Manilow 1 yet, so we're going to keep the Sweet Life talk to a minimum today. But that opened the Big Fun tour, and I really feel like this song, I mean, first of all, it's so uplifting. Like, it is a very motivational note to end this album on, but the background vocals have a huge gospel feel. It's a long way up when you're coming from nowhere. It is such a just bouncy song, and it's so fun to listen to. I really think that this is one of the masterpieces from this album, this specific song. Barry, what are your thoughts on the final track of this album?
Yeah, I agree that this is a masterpiece, because this is among all of the hopeful and inspirational songs that Manilow has ever had anything to do with, this particular song just might be at the top, because this really distills his philosophy of life in a song. It says the right words. So this song was given to Manilow. He does not know how it got to him, but somehow he got a demo from a guy named John Anesi. This was his song. Manilow put the song on and loved it immediately. So he tells a funny story that he decided to look up the guy's home phone number and gave him a call, and his sister picked up the phone and said, "Hi, this is Barry Manilow." And they didn't believe it was him, so he had to convince them that it was really Barry Manilow on the phone. And so there was a whole lot of freaking out because they didn't realize this is really Barry Manilow. And then when it sunk in, this is actually Barry Manilow on the phone, Manilow went on to tell John that he loved this song and said he wanted to record it. And that actually leads me to the commentary that Barry Manilow wrote about this song and shed some light on how this was created. He says, quote, "I love what the song said, and I wanted to record it. I mentioned that I felt that it needed a couple of changes." So Manilow went on to say, "I mentioned that I felt it needed a couple of changes and maybe a different bridge and a couple of lyric changes. And he said to me, 'Would you do it?' And I said, okay." So that's why Barry Manilow, gets credit on the record as a co-writer, but it's actually John's song again. I immediately put it in my concert act, and I closed the show with it, and it just drives people crazy. It's a very uplifting song and a very positive song. A very nice bookend to I Made It Through the Rain, only an up-tempo version of that thought. I hope big things happen for John. I think he's great. Now, we did try to do some research. We couldn't find any other projects that John Anesi had been involved in, but Logan, we were doing some research, and you found something really interesting about a time when this song actually outside of that era of the Paradise Tour, the Copacabana Tour, and the Live on Broadway Big Fun Tour. Tell us about what you found.
So, I was doing some digging on a site where people would post their reviews and their thoughts after seeing Barry Manilow concerts. And I found, this is very big to me and Barry because we had not heard of this, but I've got it right here. On May 11th, 2000, this was a show in Syracuse, New York. This was the Manilow Live, the Millennium Tour. It turns out that the writer of the song, John Anesi, was in the audience. And at one point in the show, while Manilow was sitting at the piano before starting a song, he gave him a shout out and explained who he was, explained that he wrote It's a Long Way Up, and he played a little bit of it, which is just mind-blowing. The fact that he would just be able to, in his words, whip it out on just a little whim and just do it. And then also the other way that it's been referenced in recent years is the 2011 Live in London CD, DVD. I've got it here, but I won't pull it out. He does Riders to the Stars, and at the end, he quotes it in the little gospel-tinged outro of the song. So it actually has been referenced in a couple of different eras since the mid and late 80s. However, I don't believe it's been performed in full. However, if you can prove us wrong, find our email, find our social media, and let us know. Barry, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think that this is a song that has a satisfying modulation at the end. When you hear that ending modulation, it is such a beautiful and blissful way to end the record. You can't help but feel, as the song fades out, you can't help but feel so uplifted by listening to this. And again, this is such an unusual track because it's straight up 80s rock and roll with big guitars and synthesizers and drum machines, but yet that does not take away at all from the beauty of the lyric, the message of the song, and the passion of his delivery. And I feel that when this transitioned into the late 80s, where it was a new tour for the Big Fun Tour promoting Swing Street, and then that morphed into the Live on Broadway Tour when he started playing at the Gershwin Theater on Broadway, just you can see the passion as he performs this. And this is something that my parents conveyed to me about what it was like to be there. They actually were at a matinee performance, and they had front row seats, so they were able to see this whole show up close and personal. And they say the passion when he played was so powerful, and it shook them. And so I think about that a lot. And in fact, I love this song too. And I think if more people knew it, I would definitely sing this a whole lot more. But of course, for us, one of the things that we love to do here on the Manilow Method is that we get to really introduce people to songs that maybe they did not know. Yeah. We know that there's fans of Barry Manilow throughout the years who definitely know all of the songs, but really for us, it's a pleasure for us to introduce songs that nobody has heard of. And I feel like It's a Long Way Up is the perfect example of a song that I would be more than proud to introduce to somebody if they don't know Barry Manilow or even don't know this album. This song really, I think, says a lot about who he is as a person and what he believes. So this record is bookended with two big statement songs. And now that we've hit the end of the record, I'd like to make an observation. Except for track 1, I'm Your Man, every single song has a modulation where the chorus is repeated again in a higher key at least one time. Every song on this record does that, with the exception of I'm Your Man. And so like we were saying, the whole structure of this album was to be the same Barry that you know, but more modern. Yeah. And I think, again, this is such a great way to cap off this era of writing and performing. It's a long way up, like I said, is his philosophy, and I think if we all tried to live by the words, I think we would all be successful.
Absolutely. So that is the original release right there. Now we're going to dive into a handful of bonus tracks. I want to try to kind of move through these a little quickly, if you don't mind, Barry. I think we're just going to try to keep this moving, keep the momentum going. First here, we have a song called Don't Talk to Me of Love. This is written by Charlie Starbeck, Jean Lenoir, and Tim Smith. I think I got that right. Yeah. So this is a duet with Mirielle Mattieu. Okay. This is, I believe she's French. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, she's French. So this is a duet with a French singer. And actually, there are some moments where they both sing in French. This is very interesting. I was intrigued by some of the vocal phrasing. The song felt like it would almost be a little more engaging if it was sped up a little bit to me. If it was sped up a little bit and the phrasing wasn't as drawn out, I think. But that's really my only criticism of it. This sounds like, with all the percussion elements, like this is... It could have maybe been the B-side to Some Sweet Day. What do you think of this track, Barry?
Yeah, this is a unique track in that Manilow did not have a specific hand in writing this song. This was meant as an opportunity to connect him to an international superstar, because that was the real... I think the real lure of RCA Records for Manilow was the fact that it had a bigger global reach, and one of the things that they promised to him was the ability to reach international markets. So this was a way to try to reach a market that he had never reached out to before. And we also should mention this was included on the French release of Manilow RCA, and this was a replacement for Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing. So it still had 10 songs, just replaced Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing with Don't Talk to Me of Love.
With another female duet. So, I mean, it's easy enough to swap out.
Exactly. One quick thing to mention, because we know that we have viewers who know this, and so we can't neglect this fact, that a few years after the release of Manilow RCA in 1989, The One That Got Away was a single from Barry Manilow's 1989 self-titled album. It was released as a single in the United Kingdom, and on the B-side was Don't Talk to Me of Love. However, there was a change made. The French parts were edited out, and apparently English lyrics were dubbed in. So there's a bit of a rarity out there that you can go find. But also, I think Manilow thought very fondly of this because he included the French version in the complete collection and then some box set. So that's primarily where I heard this first, and then it occurred to me that in looking at the liner notes of the box set that this was from the French release of Manilow, and then it begat my discovery of all the other things we're about to talk about here.
All right, so now we have a couple of tracks from this era that Manilow sings by himself in another language. So the song Who Needs to Dream, which when we eventually do an episode on Copacabana, the movie, and scores and all that stuff, that's when we'll really talk about Who Needs to Dream. But he put Who Needs to Dream on this record, sung in Italian. Written by Artie Butler, Barry Manilow, and then the Italian lyrics were penned by Giovanni Belfiore, I believe is how you say that. And I'm going to try here. I did my best to write out a pronunciation guide. I'm going to try my best, or make a fool of myself, trying to say Who Needs to Dream in Italian. It is Amare ti sei manchi tu. I think I got that right if my chicken scratch notes here are correct. So Who Needs to Dream in Italian. It's very interesting, and I think if you would like, Barry, if we could kind of talk about these two tracks in tandem a little bit, these two foreign language tracks. The other one that was done was Some Sweet Day. That one is pronounced Con ti sei. I want to mention that these two versions, to me, compared to the other versions I know of these songs, they don't seem quite as epic as the ones that are written in English. The production is good, but there's some secret sauce that's missing for me. Maybe give some insight to that.
Well, I should do want to point something very important out that I don't want to gloss over with Who Needs a Dream. So, Who Needs a Dream is a song that's from the Copacabana soundtrack. It's not on Manilow RCA. However, if you listen to the Italian version, you're going to notice something. It's a pop version of Who Needs to Dream. It has a piano intro, and it has a repeat and fade that you've never heard before. So, in fact, actually, I know it. So he adds a piano intro into it. So here's why that's important, Logan. We can put our tinfoil hat on. The
studio.
I believe that Who Needs to Dream was attempted for Manilow RCA, and what you're hearing on the Italian version is the backing track for a potential pop version of Who Needs to Dream. Obviously, they did not go with Who Needs to Dream on the final sequence of Manilow RCA, but it did end up being used as an Italian backing track. And more interestingly, when you look at this song and the way that it's produced in Italian, again, you hear synthesizers, guitars, and strings, an actual orchestra. So I don't think that they went through all this trouble just to do it in Italian. I think they recycled something they had produced. But one other huge interesting fact that we're going to share here that really isn't out there. In 1987, at the Barry Manilow International Fan Club Convention, the attendees of the convention were shown a video. This video had Manilow in the recording studio singing the vocal to Amare Sei Manchi 2. Now, what's not clear to me is whether this was an actual fly-on-the-wall footage of him working in the studio or if it was produced as some sort of promotional video. Well, regardless, it was never seen. The only time it's ever been publicly screened was to those that were in attendance in 1987 at the BMIFC convention. So we can say for sure that that definitely exists. Maybe one day we will get to see it for ourselves, and maybe we'll find out why they made video footage of that. But that's all I wanted to say about that, but just except to make a big deal about the fact that the Italian version of Who Needs to Dream, there's a whole lot more going on than just an international dub. But like with Some Sweet Day, it's just the same backing track, just a vocal over top of it.
So here, really quick, we just want to mention that Sakura, the traditional song, is featured on an international version of the RCA record. This is a song that he would feature in his shows when he would go over to Japan. It's a traditional Japanese song. And it's very interesting because this is one of the few songs, maybe, not off the top of my head can I think of anymore. I'm sure you can, Barry. But songs in the Manilow catalog that are sung in 100% a different language and he didn't write it. Those are very rare in the catalog. So even though it's a traditional song, it's still important to note that there is a version out there. You can pull up your streaming service and listen to this right now. It's a very sparse arrangement. What do you think of this, Barry?
I love it because, you know, he starts it out as a traditional Japanese song, which it is, and then he turns it into a pop song. Now, he debuted this in 1983 when he first visited Japan, and then he reprised it in 1985 when he visited Japan again. And I love the fact that he's really reaching out to cultures and countries all over the world through this album. And so Sakura was actually appended to the end of side one. It comes after Some Sweet Day. You hear Sakura as the end of side one of Manilow RCA.
Okay, so there's one more track here that was part of international releases, then we're going to talk about something else, and then we're going to wrap this up here. So this is In Search of Love, but this is a duet with a Japanese male singer. This is a duet with Hideki Saijo. This is In Search of Love. I have to say, this one, of all of these bonus ones that have to do with different languages, this is the one that caught my attention most. I don't know if it's something to do with the fact that In Search of Love is my favorite from this album, but there are many differences in the arrangement and the sounds being used in this version. At the beginning, there's so many different sounds that aren't used on the actual Manilow record version. And I need to point out at 1:23 in the song, there are some funky guitar riffs happening that I don't remember hearing happen in the original. So there are so many things bouncing around in this track, and I think out of all the tracks that were redone with the dubs in another language, this is the most reimagined version of one of these songs. What are your thoughts on this duet, Barry?
Yeah, so I did some research on this. Well, first off, this is not the only time this song was featured. In fact, in 1990, there was a greatest hits compilation released in Japan. It was called Aeolia, because Barry Manilow had done a commercial for a Japanese air conditioner company called Aeolia. And he wrote it, and he sang it, and they played it as a 30-second commercial. And in tying into that commercial, as well as his tour coming through Japan in 1990, they released this greatest hits compilation. Has, you know, the typical songs like Mandy. It also features Aeolia, which at the time was a brand new song, but also at the end they feature the duet version of In Search of Love. So that's how I was most familiar with that track. But what I later found is I went to the 45 release of In Search of Love. It was released as a single apparently in Japan, and what I noticed is, this is what's interesting, the production credits go to Barry Manilow, Howie Rice, and Tatsuko Akumura. So they brought in outside help to make it more stylistically appropriate to Japan. And I also should mention Hideki Saijo. Who was he? Well, actually, this was a perfect fit if you were to think of what kind of artist should collaborate with Barry Manilow, because Hideki Saijo is famous for having a hit in Japan with a Japanese translation of YMCA. So both of those artists, Hideki Saijo and Barry Manilow, were popularly associated with the late 1970s. So this was actually a great idea, and it made perfect sense to pair them up together. And also, Michael DeLug was the engineer for In Search of Love. And I think this might be a great time for me to talk about the flip side. The flip side of In Search of Love was, in fact, It's All Behind Us Now, except it was sung by Hideki Saijo in a completely new backing track that was produced by Tatsuko Akumura and engineered by Michael DeLug. So Barry Manilow does not have any involvement with that. However, the same personnel is involved, so I think that both of them were done in tandem.
That would make sense. And real quick, before we start to, move on to some other things, I wrote this down when you mentioned this in the Part 1 episode. Please read us the track listing on the cassette.
Oh, yes.
Manilow RCA.
Okay, so earlier I had mentioned that the 8-track release, which is, we believe, and we're going out on a limb and saying that this was the last ever commercially manufactured 8-track for Barry Manilow ever. But what's unique about this is, for those who don't know how 8-tracks work, you stick it in, you stick the cartridge into the player, and it's a loop, it's a tape loop. It runs continuously. You can't fast forward, you can't rewind, and what you have are 4 different programs that you could change simultaneously, and the way they sequence the album is different. So let me read you how it's sequenced. This is going to be kind of crazy. So program number 1, I'm Your Man, then In Search of Love jumps to track 3, then Some Sweet Day.
Then track 5. Wow. Okay.
And then on program number 2, Some Sweet Day concludes. So let me explain what that is. So sometimes the programs, they're only so long and they can't fit all the songs. So what they had to do was they had to put part of one song, fade it out, switch the program, then fade it in and continue it on the next program. So that's what I mean by continuing on the next program. On program number 2, Some Sweet Day concludes. Then Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing.
Track 9, okay.
Then It's a Long Way Up.
Okay.
Now program 3, we're back to At the Dance starts off program number 3.
Okay.
If You Were Here With Me Tonight.
All right.
Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again.
Those 3 are in order. Okay.
Yeah, then the program switches again to program number 4, and we conclude Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again, and then it's All Behind Us now, and finally wrapping up the album with He Doesn't Care, But I Do. How wild is that to listen to the album in that sequence? It doesn't make sense to me.
No, it does. I'm going to have to try to listen to that on my own in that sequence and see if it really doesn't make sense like I'm thinking it does. That is bizarre. That's really bizarre, I have to say.
Hello, everybody. It's Barry here. I hope you're enjoying today's program. In June 2026, Barry Manilow released the studio album What a Time, which includes the song Look at Me Now. The following discussion was taped before the announcement of the track listing of the album What a Time.
All right, so we have a handful of tracks here that we want to just briefly mention. We're going to talk about all of these in further detail, but we just want to mention the possibility that these songs have studio outtakes from this era because they were featured in the live shows leading up to the release of this RCA album. So we're going to kind of discuss 4 tracks here, I do believe. I'm going to list them off, and each one I mentioned, Barry, we're going to kind of back and forth on this. The song titles are Come With Me, Look at Me Now, How Do I Stop Loving You, and Love Me Just a Little Bit. All 4 of these songs were featured in at least a handful of live Barry Manilow concerts, and in most cases featured in a lot of Barry Manilow concerts in the second half of 1984 into 85. So Barry, why do we think that these are kind of involved? What do these songs have to do with this era?
Yeah, so they're in the same vein as Some Sweet Day and At the Dance in that he debuted them into the show with the intention that they were going to be recorded. I'm sure there was an intention to have them recorded, but what we don't know is whether or not they actually were recorded. And I want to go out on a limb and say I think that there could be a studio version of Come With Me. Because here's why. So Come With Me is a track that was written by Marty Panzer. And interestingly, Marty Panzer does not have any songs on this particular project, but apparently did write a song during this era, and it was called Come With Me, and he opened his shows with it. From 1984 all the way through mid-1985, he opened the show with Come With Me, but the second the RCA record hit the street, I'm Your Man replaced it as the opener. So because we talked about in part 1, we know for a fact that I'm Your Man was the last song to be written. I am just going to guess by process of elimination that Come With Me might have been thought of as the opening track and got bumped in favor of I'm Your Man. But of course, let me be very clear, we are speculating on that. We do not have any basis to say that's true. We don't even know if it was attempted in the studio, but I believe I would put my money on it possibly having been at least attempted, if not completed, and thought of as being the big opening track, because it definitely sounds like an opening track. So we wanted to kind of put these out into the universe, and what we'll do is we'll make a promise to go into more depth with these songs in a future episode. Maybe we'll continue to gather some research, and maybe we'll have additional information to share with you on those particular tracks. But Logan, I'm curious, you got to watch some of the Manilow TV episodes that feature these. What are your thoughts on some of these songs?
So Love Me Just a Little Bit was kind of paired up with Some Kind of Friend in some of the shows that I've seen. He talks about being the singer of a rock and roll band, which makes sense why maybe that song, had they done it in the studio after doing it live in concert, maybe it wouldn't have been featured on RCA, because the RCA record is not really a rock and roll record. And then How Do I Stop Loving You, this song that's very quiet, this ballad. He would sit on the edge of the stage. It was nice guitar accompaniment. It really doesn't fit the vibe of this record either. But Come With Me and Look at Me Now, these other songs, I feel like could have fit the vibe of this. And one other song he did in this era live in concert that's never been officially released, he would start Act 2 with a song called That's Why They Call Her Sugar. It's where he would whip it out and do the clarinet bit that's so famous in the Manilow history nowadays. But yeah, all of these songs were featured prominently in performances, at least for a little bit, and then they kind of just went away. So If somebody knows anything about those songs out there, please let us know. This episode is very long. It's going to be over an hour long. So please, Barry, quickly introduce what's about to happen, and we can send our mighty audience on their way.
So it's time now to select an MVP of the record. Logan and I are going to pick one person that contributed to this album that we believe should be conferred the title of Most Valuable Player. So Logan and I, we don't tell each other who we're going to pick, and so we're going to reveal it to each other for the first time. Logan, are you ready?
I may have to explain mine off, but yes, I'm ready.
Okay, on 3, we'll show it to the camera. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
And you said Howie Rice. I said the drum machines.
The drum machines. Okay, Logan, tell us about the drum machines.
So I thought about giving it to Howie Rice because the first 3 tracks and then the second half, the last couple of tracks. But to me, those tracks couldn't have happened without him. This whole record could not have happened without drum machines. So really, I'm not giving it to a person. I'm giving it to a piece of equipment. But this album would not have been what it was without drum machines. And who knows? Without drum machines, I'm Your Man may not have been written, and we may have gotten Come With Me on the album. So I really do think the drum machines are what turned this album into what it was. I mean, we're pretty sure we know why you picked Howie Rice, but what is your reasoning there, Harris?
Well, first thing, I will say that what you said about the drum machines, we would not have I'm Your Man if it was not for the drum machines. I picked Howie Rice, the co-producer of this record, because he brought Manilow into the 1980s, but also not just brought him into the 1980s, but made him feel at home and comfortable. And I think the first 3 tracks that Howie Rice had a hand in co-producing and co-writing, they are just bangers. I'm trying to think of an opening 3-song pairing or a 3-song package. These 3 songs rock. They are incredible. And then also Howie Rice has a lot of other co-productions throughout the rest of the record, including It's a Long Way Up, and I just mentioned what a unique sound that is with straight up rock and roll, 80s synthesized rock and roll, but yet it doesn't sound like Manilow is stretching himself. He's making a genuine artistic statement. So for that, I'm going to give Howie Rice MVP, and I also neglected to mention Howie Rice. What did he do outside of Manilow? He actually produced I've Got a New Attitude by Patti LaBelle. He had some legitimate pop credits going into this project, so I'm sure maybe the record executives at RCA paired them up, but it was definitely a good pairing, and it's a shame that there was nothing else to come of that collaboration. I think because of the way the record had performed and it wasn't promoted, when Manilow got to the later part of the 80s, he learned how to be true to who he was as an artist, and that basically led to the Swing Street record, where it's very synthesized but very rooted in jazz and swing.
Yes.
But I think that's what we're seeing in all these albums, and we've talked about a whole lot of them here. The Here Comes the Night album, Manilow RCA now. It's all leading to a place where Manilow is finding how to really tap into what's deep inside of him. So again, props to Howie Rice for allowing Manilow to do that in such a contemporary way.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we did it. This is a little exhausting today. There was so much research that had to go into this, but I truly hope that you enjoyed our ramblings and conspiracies and ideas and all of our thoughts about the Manilow RCA album. We are the Manilow Method. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at the Manilow Method. You can email us at themanilowmethod@gmail.com, and we also have a Google form that we're going to link in all sorts of places for you to find, where you can fill it out if you've seen Manilow live and tell us where you saw him, what the show date was, and what songs you heard live, because we're trying to build the biggest Barry Manilow set list archive ever built, and it is a massive spreadsheet, but it's totally worth it. So please tell us your stories and your experiences and everything you love about Barry Manilow, and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're listening on streaming platforms. We thank you so much, but subscribe on YouTube, leave a comment, leave a like, all the stuff that helps the algorithm out. We'd really appreciate it. Barry, tell all of our new viewers and listeners what we do here on our show.
Yes, so you were just with us as we talked about one of the albums in Barry Manilow's discography, but after we talk about the music, we sing and play the music. So stay tuned on our YouTube channels, because coming soon, Logan and I are going to come together for a really unique collaboration. It is so much fun to produce these covers, and as much fun as it is to research and have these discussions, it really gets much deeper for us when we crawl into these songs and really discover the truth in them and perform them. It gets very serious, but I really love this, and it really helps me connect to this music even more. So I'm so glad we do this. This is, I love every part of this, but doing these songs have been incredibly special for me. So, and thank you all for your kind and wonderful feedback and support of all that we do. And thank you for watching today.
All right, everybody, that is going to do it. This is, I believe, our longest part of a discussion so far on the Manilow method. Who knows? We might be able to break our record in the future. There's still some great albums we have yet to talk about. Please go back and check out all the other stuff we've done so far this season, and our entire first season is still available for you to go check out all the songs, all the episodes. We really hope you enjoyed our discussion today about the Manilow RCA record from 1985, and we cannot wait to dive into more of the discography in the coming weeks and months and probably years, because there is that much to talk about. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us on our next album discussion, where we'll be changing our tune here on the Manilow method. We'll see you next time.